The man who cannot lose, just lost. The machine that never breaks down, just stalled. The world number one with ice water in his veins just stared into the abyss and blinked. This isn't a story about a bad round of golf. This is a story about the weight of greatness. The kind of greatness that hasn't been seen since a man named Tiger Woods walked the earth. For almost 4 years, Scottie Scheffler was inevitable. He was the guy who never missed a cut, who never let the pressure get to him, who treated a golf course like his own personal video game. But in the summer of 2026, something changed. The whispers started. The questions started. And then, the unthinkable happened. We are pulling back the curtain on the most dominant player of his generation to find out what happens when perfection finally starts to crack. What happens when the king begins to look human? This is the story of a dynasty on the brink. This is the story of a warning sent not with words, but with silence. The sun was just beginning to rise over the coast of Scotland, but for Scottie Scheffler, the light felt a little dimmer. It was July 2026, and the golf world was holding its breath. The narrative around the world number one had shifted. He was no longer the unbeatable force of nature who had steamrolled the competition in 2024 and 2025. He was now a man under a microscope, a man whose every swing was being dissected for signs of decline. The fear was palpable. Was Scottie Scheffler, the man who had won 7 times in a single season and hauled in more than $62 million in prize money, finally losing his grip? The whispers that had started as murmurs were now a roar. It was a roar that Scheffler, for the first time in his career, seemed to actually hear. The stoic, emotionless facade that had made him so formidable was showing hairline fractures. This was a player who had famously declared that his identity wasn't a golf score, who had publicly wrestled with the existential meaning of his success. But in the spring of 2026, the score started to matter in a way it hadn't before. The margins he had always commanded had shrunk to almost nothing. The field was catching up, or maybe, just maybe, he was coming back down to earth. His approach play, the very foundation of his dominance, had dipped. He wasn't the same iron player who had painted flags with surgical precision a year earlier. The pressure was becoming a tangible thing. This was a man who had once told the world that golf was a sport, not a life. But the reality of being the undisputed king, of carrying the expectations of a generation starved for a true great, was beginning to chafe. His inner circle, including his mental coach Brad Payne, could see it. They could see the weight he was carrying, the same weight that had made other greats crumble under its sheer intensity. The chase for history, the comparisons to Tiger Woods, the constant, unrelenting spotlight. It was a storm that had been brewing for years, and it was about to break. To understand the magnitude of what happened at the Renaissance Club, you have to understand the streak that Scottie Scheffler had built. It wasn't just a number. It was a monument to consistency, the kind of sustained excellence that golf had not seen since Tiger Woods was in his prime. For 1,428 days, Scheffler had shown up on Thursday and known, with absolute certainty, that he would be playing on the weekend. That streak stretched all the way back to the 2022 FedEx St. Jude Championship. Think about everything that happened in the world during that time. The global landscape shifted. Careers were made and broken. And through it all, Scottie Scheffler just kept making cuts. 78 consecutive cuts made. That was the number. It was the 5th longest streak in PGA Tour history, a testament to a player who simply refused to have a bad week. The next longest active streak, after Scheffler's run ended, belonged to Matt Fitzpatrick at 28 events. The gap between number 1 and number 2 wasn't just a lead, it was a chasm. Scheffler was operating on a level that seemed to exist outside of the normal fluctuations of professional golf. Even when he wasn't at his absolute best, he was still good enough to make the weekend. He hadn't finished outside the top 25 in any tournament since 2024. That's the kind of dominance that makes other players shake their heads in disbelief. The streak was so consistent that it had almost become a given. It was a background assumption, like gravity. You didn't think about it because it was always there. But the thing about streaks, the thing that makes them so fragile, is that they don't end with a bang. They end with a whisper. They end with a putt that slides just past the hole. They end with a 2 over 72 that doesn't look that bad on paper, but in the cold light of the scoreboard, it is catastrophic. That's what happened at the Scottish Open. He wasn't spraying the ball all over the course. He wasn't making triple bogeys. He just couldn't get any momentum. The putts that had always dropped, the critical shots that had always found the mark, they just didn't happen. And by the time the second round was over, the streak was gone. The weight of 1,428 days of consistency had finally become too heavy to carry. Scheffler, ever the pragmatist, tried to put it in perspective. He noted that the PGA Tour's new signature events, which often don't have a cut, had complicated the streak's significance. It was a defensive gesture, a way of saying the streak wasn't as impressive as the numbers suggested. But everyone knew the truth. This wasn't about the format of the events. This was about a crack in the armor. This was the first tangible proof that the great Scottie Scheffler, the man who had won the American Express back in January, was now in the middle of a season that felt strangely empty. His win total was stuck at 1 for the year. The majors had come and gone without him hoisting a trophy. And now, the unthinkable had happened. He had been sent home early. The question that hung in the air as he packed his bags wasn't just about one bad tournament. It was about whether something deeper had shifted. The king had not just stumbled. He had fallen flat on his face, and the golf world was watching to see if he would get back up. The missed cut in Scotland was a shock, but it was the silence that followed that truly unsettled the golf world. Scottie Scheffler didn't talk about it the way he usually did. There was no philosophical deflection, no calm dismissal of the noise. There was just a quiet, focused determination that felt different. He headed to Royal Birkdale early, a week ahead of his title defense at the Open Championship, and he got to work. The narrative was simple. The king had stumbled, but he was about to remind everyone why he wore the crown. And for 3 days at Birkdale, it looked like the script was writing itself. Scheffler was hitting the ball with the kind of precision that had made him a 4-time major winner. He was the best player in the field from tee to green, gaining an astonishing 2.77 shots per round on the field with his ball striking. It was vintage Scheffler. He was painting flags, hitting approaches inside 9 feet, making the hardest shots on the toughest course look routine. By Friday, he was putting on one of the best links ball striking displays anyone had ever seen. CBS analyst Johnson Wagner would later say that if Scheffler had putted at an average level that week, he would have won the tournament by 10 shots. 10 shots in a major championship. But this is where the story takes its sharpest turn. Scheffler's putter, the club that had transformed him from a great ball striker into an unstoppable force, betrayed him. He lost strokes on the greens, something that had happened only twice in the previous 12 months. He couldn't make the short ones. He went 56 consecutive holes without making a birdie putt of more than 7 feet. The frustration that had been building all season finally boiled over on the 17th tee on Sunday, a moment captured on camera that showed a man who could no longer hide his emotion. He was chasing, always chasing, and every time he got close, the putter would let him down. He finished tied for 4th, 3 shots behind the winner, Ryan Fox. It was another major, another near miss, another chapter in a season that was starting to feel like a Greek tragedy. The missed cut in Scotland was supposed to be the exclamation point on a season of disappointment. But Scottie Scheffler, the 4-time major champion who had not won since January, arrived at Royal Birkdale with something to prove. And on a sun-drenched Thursday morning on the English coast, he made the loudest statement possible. He shot a 2 under 68, putting himself right back into the thick of the Open Championship race. The sky was blue, the grass was brown, and Scottie Scheffler was back in contention. It was like he had never left. What made the round so impressive was the precision. Scheffler hit 13 of 14 fairways, the best driving performance in the entire field. He was in complete control of his golf ball. The ball striking that had defined his career and made him the most feared player on the planet was back in full force. He birdied 4 of his first 6 holes, briefly holding the lead all by himself. It was the kind of start that reminded everyone why he had won this tournament the year before. The frustration of the Scottish Open, the questions about his putting, the doubts about his season, all of it seemed to meld away as he marched up the Birkdale fairways. But golf, as Scheffler himself has said, is played over 72 holes. And the challenge of links golf is that it never lets you get comfortable. On the 17th hole, a par 5 that should have been a scoring opportunity, Scheffler's approach shot veered right and settled in a thick patch of nasty grass. He thought the ball might have been stepped on by a spectator, but no one would fess up. He took a risky lash at it, and the ball shot straight left, across the fairway, and into the heather on the other side. From there, he managed to get it onto the green, but settled for a bogey. The kind of bad break that could have derailed a lesser player. But Scheffler didn't let it break him. He finished the round at 2 under, just 2 shots off the lead held by Sung Jae Im and Dan Brown. The defending champion was in the hunt. The narrative was shifting. This wasn't a player in decline. This was a player who had taken his medicine, found his game, and was ready to remind the world who he was. Then came the second round, and the story took on a new layer of drama. Scheffler put on a clinic. He was bogey-free. He hit the ball so well, so consistently, that he left the course feeling like he had done everything right. The problem was the putter. He missed 7 birdie putts from 15 feet or less. 4 of them were from inside 10 feet. The 2 birdie putts he did make were tap-ins. He shot another 68, but it could have been a 64. The frustration that had plagued him all season was right there again, lurking in the margins. He was striking the ball like a king, but he was putting like a mortal. Still, there was a quiet confidence in his voice. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't blaming the clubs. He was just stating the facts. He had given himself the chances. He had knocked on the door. If he could just find the range on the greens, the claret jug would be his to lose. He was 4 shots behind the leader, Lucas Herbert, heading into the weekend. It wasn't the lead he wanted, but it was a position of strength. He had weathered the storm. Now, the question was whether he could convert this momentum into the victory that would completely flip the narrative of his entire season. The man who had sent a chilling warning to the PGA Tour was back. The only question was whether he could finally deliver the knockout blow. The statistics told a story that defied logic. Scottie Scheffler had just finished tied for 4th at the Open Championship, his 3rd top 5 finish in a major this season. In the 4 majors of 2026, his strokes gained. Tee to green ranks were 1st, 4th, and 5th. He was the best ball striker on the planet, and it wasn't particularly close. His cumulative score across all 4 majors was matched only by Sam Burns, and the 2 of them were well ahead of the next pack of players. By every measurable metric except the one that mattered most, Scheffler was still the king. The problem was the putter. At Birkdale, he lost nearly 1/3 of a stroke per round to the field on the greens. He was one of the 3 worst putters in the field through 3 rounds, missing short putts constantly and getting nothing to fall for birdie. He went 56 consecutive holes without making a birdie putt of more than 7 feet. CBS analyst Johnson Wagner would later say that if Scheffler had simply putted at an average level, he would have won the tournament by 10 shots. 10 shots. In a major championship. It was one of the best links ball striking days I've ever seen, Wagner said. The frustration was written all over Scheffler's face, a rare sight for a man who had built his reputation on an unshakable, stoic demeanor. But here is where the story takes a turn that reveals just how dangerous this man really is. The missed cut in Scotland, the putting woes at Birkdale, the entire season of near misses, none of it broke him. He walked off the course at Royal Birkdale with a 4th-place finish, a season without a major victory, and the weight of 1,000 questions on his shoulders. And then he did what champions do. He got back to work. Just 4 days after his final putt at Birkdale, Scheffler teed it up at the 3M Open in Minnesota, a tournament he had never played before. And in the first round, he fired a 6 under 65, gaining more than 3 strokes on the field with his putter, the second-best putting performance of the day. He fixed his biggest problem in the span of a single flight across the Atlantic. The message was clear. Scottie Scheffler was not going to let one bad putting week define his legacy. He was not going to let a season without a major win shake his confidence. He was still the world number 1, still the FedEx Cup points leader, still the most dominant player in the game. But the warning he sent wasn't just about his ability to bounce back. It was about something deeper. It was the realization that this season, this frustrating, maddening season that had seen him win just 1 tournament, had also seen him finish in the top 5 nearly 65% of the time. He had earned over $15 million in a year that people were calling a disappointment. He was playing at a level that would be a career year for anyone else, and he was doing it while fighting the most stubborn putter of his life. The warning was this: if Scottie Scheffler ever figures out how to putt consistently on links greens, if he ever solves the one puzzle that has eluded him this season, the rest of the PGA Tour is in serious trouble. He is too good from tee to green. He is too consistent. He is too mentally tough. Rich Beem, the 2002 PGA champion, watched Scheffler's final round at Birkdale and saw something different. A player who was willing to take risks, to fly at flagsticks, to hit driver on holes he normally wouldn't. He felt like he had to. He had to step on the gas, Beams said. I'm interested to know whether or not he'll take a look at some of that and say, maybe it's time to go ahead and step on the gas a little bit. If Scheffler adds that aggressive gear to his already devastating game, the rest of the tour might as well start playing for second place. The season is not over. The FedEx Cup playoffs are still ahead. And Scottie Scheffler, the man who cannot lose, has just reminded everyone that he is still standing. The missed cuts, the near misses, the major-less year, they are all part of a story that is far from finished. The king is still on his throne. He is just sharpening his sword.